All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I'd like to welcome you to the debate for the candidates for CD2, U.S. House of Representatives here in New Hampshire. I'm going to introduce our candidates from your left to my right. First is Brian Belanger. He's a father and small business owner, and he has businesses in home services and food service. Then next is Steve Negron. Steve is a retired Air Force officer and owner of a small business. He's also a current New Hampshire State Representative. Dr. Stuart Levinson is a board-certified rheumatologist and one of the Manchester VA whistleblowers. Robert Burns is a graduate of Keene State College, so welcome back to the campus. He is a business owner and former Manchester Selectman and current Deputy Treasurer of Hillsborough County. Gerard Boulogne is born in northern New Hampshire. He's an author and a roofing system designer. Lynn Blankenbecker is a former New Hampshire State Representative. Lynn is a lawyer and is currently the commanding officer of a U.S. Naval Reserve unit. Missing from the stage today is Jay Mercer, who's also a candidate, but we don't expect he'll attend this event. Without further ado, I'd like to begin. Please be seated, candidates. Before the event, the candidates drew a number out of a bucket that basically gives them their order of answering the first question. Every subsequent question will move one person in my direction in order to answer that question, so that by the time we get through all the questions, everybody will have a chance to have gone first. So the first question for candidate Belanger. How will your election make life better for the citizens of Cheshire County and CD2?
Can I do the Pledge of Allegiance first?
If you want to, we certainly can.
We start with this.
Go ahead. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, you take 2 minutes to answer the question, and I'm putting you on a timer, so when it goes off, you'll know your time is up.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me out to speak to you guys tonight. So I would like to bring better education support, a greater workforce, and to keep small businesses in New Hampshire with my election. Having grown up in a small town, I know that progress, growth need to be hand in hand with New Hampshire's values. CD2 has been a loud voice for this election. I've traveled all over to hear everyone. I've spent a lot of time in Cheshire County. The people here know what they want and need. I know I am here to fill the people's seat and bring their voice to Washington. Thank you.
Steve Negron, same question. You have to pass the mic at least to the first three people.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much to the Cheshire County Republican Committee for having this, and for everybody here coming out on this beautiful day. You could be by the pool or by a lake or doing something, but you chose to listen to us, so we're really excited about that. Before I get going, I'd like to say that there's a couple of people from my extended family that drove all the way here to Keene to be with me. Teresa is my niece from New York, and Matthew, my nephew from Pennsylvania, so thanks guys for coming. I appreciate it. So why would my election be good for Cheshire County? Because I listen. I understand what's going on. We've been in this district. It's about hearing what you have. It's about understanding what the needs are from Cheshire County. You know, right now we have a representative that doesn't believe that she has to listen. She just thinks she has all the answers. That's not what I'm about. It's about listening. My grandmother used to say, I have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And that's about listening and bringing your voice to Washington. And we don't have that right now. You know, in going around Cheshire County and throughout the 2nd Congressional, there's this great national insecurity that everybody's feeling. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the northern country, Cheshire County, or down in Hillsborough, right? We have issues about the opioid. We have issues about illegal immigration, about national defense, about the border. We have all these issues. And with me at the helm, I've heard, I've listened, and I understand, and I will be your voice because that's my job. As a representative is to be the voice of Cheshire County, not myself. This isn't my seat. This is your seat. And I promise you I'll be your best representative ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Levinson.
Thank you. Again, thanks for arranging this. It's important to have a well-informed electorate, and this is where it starts. How are things going to be better once I'm elected? Let's look at how things are going now. We have a president who is not accepting the status quo. I've been an early supporter of the president. He's a fellow New Yorker. Deregulation, allowing businesses to grow and prosper. Lower taxes, full employment. All these things make life better for the people of Cheshire County, the people of New Hampshire, and the people of the United States. And that's what we need to continue. Because if we don't take this seat back, then the Democrats are going to work to stall a Republican agenda that's working very hard to improve the lives of the people in Cheshire County all the way from Washington. Washington seems like a long way away. It's esoteric. We don't really think about it except when we hear about the next crisis. But what we do in Washington affects us every single day. So this deregulation, this creating jobs, helping people through legislation. The other area that people get a chance to interact with their Congress is through constituent services. We haven't had constituent services under Ann Custer. If we did, I probably wouldn't be up here on the stage because I met with Ann Custer to try to get better services for our veterans, and her first response was the VA wasn't in her district. Never mind the thousands of veterans that are from her district that need those services, that we have to keep our promises. So constituent services can make everyone's life better in this county. How many times through government running poorly, you're just not getting what you need from government? Imagine you're going on vacation in 3 months. You apply for a passport. The months tick off. You don't get your passport. So you call your congressman. If you call Ann Custer, I can tell you it's form letter 302. You get it in the mail, and it gives you a nice apology for all the things she's not going to do for you. So constituent services as well as legislative services is how I'm going to work to improve the lives of the citizens of New Hampshire and our district.
It's good to be back at Keene State College. Go Owls. How am I going to help improve the lives of the people here? Well, I'm going to talk about a few things that I'm going to do that's very important to the people of Cheshire County and New Hampshire. Opioids is a huge crisis, and we're not spending the money the right way. The rehabilitation centers are more addicted to the cash than the drug addicts are to the drugs. We need to invest in programs that work, not the same old rehabilitation centers that have proven not to work. Another thing is we're not going to pass legislation that's currently in the House that makes it easier for doctors to prescribe opioids and try to use opioids to combat the opioid crisis. Also, we're going to cut the spending because we're mortgaging our children's future. And as a manufacturer and a business owner here in New Hampshire, we need to cut the red tape. We need to work on government regulation to reduce it. And I'm also going to hold up the promise that Donald Trump made. And I'm going to go there to support his agenda and his agenda items and deliver to the people who voted for him, the people in Cheshire County that made him the President of the United States.
Gerard Boulogne.
Get the microphone. All right, it's working. My name is Gerard Boulogne, obviously. I was born and raised on a dairy farm. I'm not a slick-tongued politician, part of the elite with shiny black shoes. I was every morning when I went into the dairy barn, I saw what political promises looked like because the barn floor was covered with them. So when you hear people speak and they come and they say, we want to help you, and we're from the government, we want to help you, that's the time you want to turn and run. The way that I will help all the citizens of the state of New Hampshire is to cut the taxes and cut the spending. Right now, the biggest threat, and this is from a general, said that the biggest threat to our society here is not the Taliban, it's not Russia, it's our national debt. 21 trillion and counting. The servicing of the debt is 500 to 600 billion per year. Where is this going to get us? Our children and grandchildren won't be able to pay. They're going to have to pay 80% of their income. It's not going to happen. There's going to be a huge crash unless we address this 10 years ago. That's when it should have been addressed. Now it's getting to be a monster that's out of hand. And the only way that I believe I can help all the citizens of the state of New Hampshire and Congressional District 2 is to cut the taxes, cut the spending, and let you control your own money and spend it as you see fit instead of giving it to politicians who promise to do something for you. And take care of yourself first. The government's only purpose, its first purpose, is to make sure that no man need fear another. This is from the original founders. Just, keep the people who have a bigger gun from controlling those who have no guns. Thank you.
Candidate Lynn Blankenbecker.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for coming out this evening. It's always exciting to see such a great crowd. So how will I make life better for the citizens of Cheshire County and certainly for the citizens of CD2? Government's job is to provide opportunity for all of us, and that's exactly what I intend to do, is to go to Congress and make those opportunities that all of you will see fit as to how you want to live your life and have the desires that you want. So the way I'll do that is making sure that, our taxes are low so you can keep your dollars in your pocket, making sure that we have jobs for folks in the community, and making sure that you have a safe nation, so a place that you can go, and be here in safety and enjoy this country like we should. I've been in the military for 32 years, and national security has been a huge issue for me. It's certainly been important to me, and it has been a big focus of my life. But, we aren't going to get all this, everything passed, and we aren't going to get effective opportunity for people in this nation and certainly in this state if we don't work together. And so it's my desire and certainly my goal to bring some civility to Congress and get folks working together. Government shutdowns, continuing resolutions, those don't help us in our nation. They chip away at national security and take away our freedoms. And so I want to make sure that I provide that opportunity for all of us by working together with everyone in Congress to make sure that we have enough opportunities for everyone in this room. Thanks.
Okay, before we go on to the next question, the candidates have been kind in thanking everybody for coming. I'd like to echo that. But I'd also like to thank our hosts, Keene State College, who provided this venue free of charge. So I think that's wonderful. I'd also like to thank Representative Jim McConnell, who was instrumental in coordinating and helping this get set up. By the way, he's running for re-election for state rep for New Hampshire and Swansea Richmond. And I'd also like to thank Ed Bryans, who's back there running the camera, who's a candidate for the New Hampshire State House in Marlborough, Troy. Did I get that right? You got a thumbs up. And the camera equipment is courtesy of Cheshire TV. So that's the thank yous I had to do before we went on to the next question. Steve Negron will answer this question first. What committees will you request to serve on in Congress and why?
Thank you for the question. Very simple. I can serve on multiple committees, and the reason why is because my various experiences lends it to that. First and foremost is the Armed Services Committee. I am a retired Air Force officer, but my experience in the military was varied. It wasn't singularly focused. I was an ICBM missile combat crew member, so I understand the nuclear world. That's very important right now, what's going on in North Korea and also with some of the deals that are out there. I was also an acquisition officer, so I understand how the Defense Department buys acquisition bombs, bullets, airplanes, ships. That's a very important thing. And then I finished up my career in Space Command, so I understand the space side of the Air Force and the Department of Defense. So I would like to first and foremost sit on the HASC, the House Armed Services Committee. On there they have a couple of subcommittees. One is the Nuclear Committee, which I could sit on and become a formidable force right away. There's also manpower. I can sit on that, and I understand those things because as a commander, I know what those issues are. Veterans Affairs. As a veteran, I lived the life of a veteran. My father was a veteran. My wife's a 30-year veteran. My family has over 109 years of military service and still counting because our son is on active duty today. So I understand all the issues, unlike Ann Custer, who sits on the Veterans Affairs Committee and only comes when it's opportunistic for her to take a photo op here. So I've lived it. My parents have lived it. I've lived under it, and my son is currently living it. The last one is on a small business. I, too, am a small business owner. I started my company in 2005 and continue to have it. I understand what it is to write your name on both sides of the check. So my first one would be the House Armed Services Committee because of my varied experience in the military. The second one would be on the Veterans Affairs, and the last one would be on a small business. Thank you.
Dr. Levinson.
This was a very good question because it shows what areas that we want to help in our own community as well as for the United States as a whole. Government oversight and reform, I feel, is one of the most important committees. While I worked at the VA, I learned the problems there were the same in so many other government agencies. Be it the State Department or others, they have the same problems with personnel, they have the same problems with supplies, the same problems across the board in how they fund things. And the end result is there's probably 30 to 40% waste across the board in government agencies, where managers hire employees to make their own job easier and not to get the mission accomplished. So I feel, just like I blew the whistle on incompetence at the VA, being on government oversight, I can blow the whistle on the other departments in Washington, and that will make us a stronger country and a more efficient country. Of course, VA affairs is my expertise. At the height of my career at the VA, I was overseeing 8 medical centers in 6 states, 800 employees, so I know about what veterans need. I've taken care of them my entire career. They've come to me. I would feel that I wasn't doing them justice if I didn't serve on that committee. And finally, with my career in healthcare, I feel that one of the major committees having to do with healthcare, either Science, Technology, and Commerce, or one of the other many committees, because healthcare is going to be an issue that is with us for the next generation. We just keep kicking this can down the road. Obamacare has exchanged one group of uninsured patients for another, and we are making no progress. So being on those committees, I feel I can accomplish the most and keep the promises I made to the constituents. Thank you.
Robert Burns.
So the first committee is the industry that I've worked in for the majority of my life is quality control, automation, and manufacturing, mostly in the pharmaceutical industry, also in some other food, and as well as the explosives and defense industry as well. But it's mostly in the pharmaceutical industry. There is very few people my age with as much experience in pharmaceutical manufacturing, so I would go with appropriations, particularly under the FDA, with the oversight committee on the FDA under appropriations. The second committee that I would be most interested in, with my background of the multi-industries that I've been involved in, is science and technology. Specifically under science and technology, when you saw the other day Mark Zuckerberg come before the congressional and Senate meetings and investigation, we learned that the majority of our congressmen and senators have very little knowledge of social media, the internet, and quite frankly, many of them I'd be surprised if they knew how to turn on a computer. And that's really sad. And I say that jokingly, but it's probably true. Also under science and technology, I've been an amateur astronomer, and I'm very interested in space. And of course, space also falls under science and technology. Thank you.
Gerard Boulogne.
I would want to serve on the Finance Committee because I don't know how good your memories are here, but in 2008 when President Bush was going out and Obama was coming in, there was some big manufactured financial crisis where they needed $700 billion to the Troubled Assets Relief Program, TARP. $700 billion they asked for to save the economy. Didn't do anything. It led to 8 years of poor performance in the economy. The $700 billion was handed out to one unaccountable bureaucrat to be spent as he saw fit. Where'd the money go? Nobody knows. $700 billion. If I stole $1 million from you guys, I'd go to jail. They steal $700 billion from us. And all you have to do to see that is just Google Senator Judd Gregg, Gerard Boulogne, and it comes on YouTube, when you get to YouTube. And he's pushing it and pushing it. He's promising to carry President Obama's water when he gets to the Senate. This is Senator Judd Gregg, voting for $700 billion. He was excoriated by President Trump's Secretary of Finance, I forget his name, Ludlow, and Kudlow. And nobody knows where the $700 billion went. It's not unaccounted for. $700 billion. I'd like to know. I'd like to audit the Fed. Why is the Fed never being audited? Supposedly we own the Fed, and nobody's auditing it. I mean, a lot of people ask me for it. It never gets done. I thought President Trump would do it by now. He hasn't done it. So that's the committee I'd like to serve on, because a cancer is fed by a blood supply. And now we have a swamp in Washington. If we cut off the blood supply, we can reduce the size of the cancer. We'll never get rid of corruption completely. But we sure can cut it back some. And I think cutting the finances out of these programs would kill the cancer. Thank you.
Lynn Blankenbecker.
Thanks. Thank you. So I think I would be very well utilized on the Health and Human Services, so on the Ways and Means and the Subcommittee of Health and Human Services. Being a nurse for the last 32 years and having worked in a single-payer system and in the private sector simultaneously, I have both received and delivered care in both systems. I'm also a healthcare attorney. I've dealt with healthcare law. And my last 5 years of active duty, when I got home in January of this year, was at the Pentagon and at the Defense Health Headquarters doing high-level policy development in coordination with Congress. So I feel like I bring a lot of experience in the realm of healthcare in this nation. Obviously, healthcare is a huge issue right now for our country, and I think I would bring an expansive wealth of knowledge for that. I also think I would be well utilized on the HASC, on the House Armed Services Committee. Again, I just spent the last 5 years at the Pentagon working high level, working with Congress on our national defense and with our military. I've been a military officer, like I've said, for 32 years, and so for 32 years I've spent my time dealing with the military and how we finance the military, how we strategize the military, policy development for the military, and I'm very accustomed to briefing admirals and having prepared briefs for Congress for our admirals during that time. I also think I would be well utilized in Ways and Means from a budget perspective. As a person who served 2 terms in the House of Representatives here, well, a term and a half. I was selected in a special election in 2009. In 2010, we balanced a budget, and I'm used to working with budgets at the state level, certainly in my command, and with the military, and obviously at the Pentagon. And so I have a wealth of knowledge in balancing complex budgets, and so I think I would be well utilized in any of those committees. So Health and Human Services, HASC, or in Ways and Means. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan Ballinger.
Well, I'm going to first start off with the Small Business Committee, because with my experience in small business, I believe that the connection between technology, the consumers, and that needs to be increased for our small businesses here in New Hampshire, for our small business owners. The Granite State started. Granite State back years ago started with small businesses. My father being one. In our local town, there's a local store in town. This goes back to generations, the 1800s. So these small businesses need support. The other committee that I would really try to work hard on would be appropriations, because I believe we need to really put a stronghold on the purse strings. We need to kind of put regulations on where our money's going in the government and try and help stop the bleeding in Washington. And the third committee I'd shoot for would be the Rules Committee. Now, the Rules Committee helps the Speaker control the floor during the votes and during a lot of the session. And the other thing it does is it kind of takes a tally of who comes to work every day and who doesn't come to work every day. And I believe that if I didn't go to work or you didn't go to work, we'd be fired. So we need to start making some of our congressmen and senators accountable for coming to votes and coming to work every day. And that's the committees I believe that I would best be utilized for the Granite Staters. Thank you.
Before we go to the next question, just a little explanation on how these questions were developed. We have a Cheshire County Republican Committee meeting just about the second Saturday of every month over at the old county courthouse here in Keene. And as a group, we developed the subject areas that we wanted to ask questions on. Some of them fell into an essay answer kind of a question, and some fell into a yes or no. So these questions were developed by your neighbors and friends who came to the Cheshire County Republican Committee meeting last Saturday. They were emailed to the candidates on Sunday, so they've had a couple of days to look at them, and I appreciate their keeping their answers nice and concise tonight. Dr. Levinson, you'll be the first to answer this question. What is your position on border security and immigration, both illegal and legal?
We have to end illegal immigration. We are a nation of immigrants. There's no question about this. We are the richer for being a nation of immigrants. But we will never control the opioid crisis or end what has become a national fiasco of an immigration policy while our borders remain porous. This has to end. As a nation, we are so divided, we can't even agree on essentially having borders or deporting the violent criminal aliens that have become the scourge of our inner cities. I mean, never mind that New Hampshire so far appears somewhat insulated from the crime in the inner cities such as Chicago, such as LA. We haven't seen it to that degree, but that doesn't mean it won't come here in one way or another. We have to prevent the violence of other countries being exported illegally to our shores. The drugs come across our borders, and we don't control that at all. A wall is something that will keep immigration where we want it to be as a nation. We can agree on the standards for immigration. And yes, we do need legal immigrants in this country. We have full employment. There are jobs that Americans would drive the cost of the product up so high that the jobs can't be filled at competitive wages. So I'm not saying we don't need immigration. I'm saying that we need to decide what we want to do as a country with immigration. The values that we need, accepting the people that bring skills to this country and not problems. If there's groups that do have asylum needs, we can decide, we can judge whether to grant people asylum, on what standards, the relative danger from which they fled, not just that the crime in their home country is high, because guess what? Most of the world does not have the low crime rate that the U.S. has, despite what others will tell you. Anyway, that's what I think should be done with immigration.
Robert Burns.
Illegal is illegal. A nation without borders is not a nation. I am a strong supporter of the wall, but not just the wall. We need to be using technology, drones, sensors, artificial intelligence to protect this country from illegal immigration and the nefarious people that want to come here to break our laws. My mother's an immigrant. I'm a first-generation American. She came to this country legally, and she was elected to the New Hampshire House of Representatives. So nobody's as strong a supporter of legal immigration than I am. I'm also a supporter of HB1 visas to bring in the desperately needed high-tech workers that we need here for our high-tech industry, as well as the seasonal workers that we need here in New Hampshire, whether it's the ski mountains or picking apples down in Hollis, New Hampshire. Thank you.
Gerard Boulogne.
I'm the perfect candidate for this question because my parents are both legal immigrants to this country. They came over in the 40s before government programs, before they needed any government programs. There were no government programs. They came here, had to work. They came here with money. They asked to come in. They said, can we come in? And they were tested for every disease They didn't want anybody coming in carrying any communicable diseases. And if you tried to cross a cow across the border and you got caught without getting a veterinary check, you would be prosecuted. And we have a lot of these people, like my parents came and they had to be tested for every disease. We don't know who's coming across. There's now been an uptick on all kinds of these diseases that we've never heard before, that were pretty much conquered in this country, but are rampant in third world countries. And, you know, we need to have a border and control who's coming in and out, and that's just a no-brainer. And also, there's an old joke, is how do you sneak a nuclear bomb into the United States? Simple. You hide it inside of a bale of marijuana. So we need to control everything coming in. I mean, who knows what's coming in? If they can bring in truckloads of marijuana, why can't they bring in a nuclear bomb? And so the wall is a big step, but even if there's a wall, you can sneak a bomb in from a harbor, any boat. I mean, it's just, we just need to have the sensors that Mr. Burns was mentioning. They got satellites that can read license plates from outer space. They should be able to find some sensors that'll detect radiation on a boat, you know, that's coming in. And so there's, you know, border security is like, you know, without borders, a country without borders is not a country.
Thank you. Lynn Blankenbecker.
Thank you. There is a disadvantage to drawing number 7 sometimes, because I think this is a panel of people who all agree that we need to tighten up our borders. So I'm probably not going to tell you anything new. But you know, just as my predecessors have said here tonight, we definitely need to secure our borders, whether that's with a literal wall, a figurative wall, or some sort of combination between that, using you know, the literal wall and the electronics. And certainly our president has used human beings right now, using our National Guard, which is exactly what they're designed to do. And I think that's a great first step. Certainly, probably everybody in this room has really relevant and recent immigration roots. My grandparents immigrated to this country. My parents were first-generation immigrants, just like many of you in this room. My parents only spoke English. My parents served, both of them, in World War II. My father at the Kwajalein Atoll as a Marine. Where's my Marine? And my mother in the Army as a nurse. And so I think many of us share those same immigrant roots, and it's certainly, but we are a land of laws, and we need to make sure that we enforce the laws that are put in place. And so, you know, if we have an issue with the way our process works to legally immigrate into this country, then we certainly should take a look at that. But we need to enforce our laws. We need to make sure that our border is secure with a wall, electronic surveillance, human beings. We need to make sure that our laws are being followed and that we're getting the right people into the country that we want. You know, we need to know who is in our country. There are a lot of bad actors out there all over the world that are just dying to come over here and do their bad acts right here. So we need to know who's coming into our country. So yes, we need to secure our borders. Thank you.
Brian Bellinger.
Illegal immigration is out of hand. The way we handle it really needs to be repaired and fixed. The erratic way that we handle the illegal immigrants that are coming into our country is increasingly giving security concerns to our citizens, and it needs to be repaired. Now, legal immigration, I was just reading, we're at a storage bin with my granddaughter, and she pulled out a book about Ellis Island. And it says 3 words on the top of this book: we the people. If our immigrants want to come to our country and work hard and put the time in like every law-abiding citizen, that's wonderful. We need to help streamline that process. We can't leave them for months and months and months in the detention center. We need to try and streamline the vetting system and just help our country help them if they want to come in the proper way. So I do believe that, yes, like Mr. Burns says, we do need HB1 visas. We do need to help some of those businesses in our state and in other states that need them. You know, we have carnival workers, we have like the apple pickers. They need some help. So if they want to come the legal way, I'm all for it. And I want to help that process by help streamlining it so we're not having them sit for months in a detention center. Let's help streamline the ones that help get them vetted properly and get them in. And then get the dangerous ones, send them back to the country that they came from. That way their country can deal with the dangerous criminals and we can move on. Thank you.
Steve Negron.
It's more than just immigration. It's about national security. There's 185 ways to come into this country through a visa. Let's leave citizenship over here for a second. That's 10 steps. We know them well. 185 ways to come into this country. You can come here as a seasonal worker, come here as a student, come here to get married. I need to know who's in my country. I need to know what your purpose is and where you are. If I don't have that understanding, it's a national security issue for me. I'm a grandson of a Mexican immigrant from Michoacan, Mexico. He came here in 1921, and that's what he did it. We're a land of laws. There's a right way to do it, and we're not doing it. And we need to get back to it. But it's more than a wall. Do I want a wall? Absolutely. But it isn't about immigration. It's about drugs. It's about terrorism. People don't realize that countries like Central and South America bring terrorists through this country through our porous borders. And it's not just the South. We need to look at our ports. We need to look at our airports. Look, today there was a vote in the House, and your representative, Ann Custer, voted neutral as a vote of confidence for ICE. Neutral. It's like, don't even be there. She might as well have said, I'm not here. It's apathy. You can't have that in a representative. You absolutely cannot have that. We need to know that we have a representative that understands the issue, that understands that it's important just like any other national security issue. It's not just one, it's everything combined. And so I'm all for legal immigration. I wouldn't be standing here in front of you. Thank you, Grandpa. But I'm against illegal immigration because it's a national security threat.
Thank you. Robert Burns will be the first to answer the next question, which starts to get into international affairs. What is your position on Israel and our troops in the Middle East?
Israel. Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East. Israel is our greatest friend there, possibly a necessary military base, and the first line on our war on radical Islamic terrorism that's growing over there in the Middle East. I fully support Israel, and I fully support Donald Trump's moving the embassy finally to Jerusalem. And I think that we should all thank Donald Trump for finally fulfilling that long promise that's been made a long time ago. As far as the troops in the Middle East and the Middle East goes, we definitely need to be there to help stop the Islamic terrorism, the fundamentalists from growing there. But other Middle Eastern countries that have a vested interest in stable governments over there need to step up. It's not always the United States that's going to send boots on the ground. Saudi Arabia needs to step up with troops. They need to step up with money, but we'll be there to support them. And we need to support other countries like that in the Middle East to have a strong, stable environment for economic prosperity and to curb the amount of radical Islamic terrorism that grows over there, whether it be ISIS or the Taliban or what have you. Thank you.
Gerard Boulogne.
I'd like to expand on the border security thing just for a second. Is that illegal immigration, the reason why they come here illegal is to look for jobs. If you make it illegal to hire an illegal immigrant, they'll go back home. There's no magnet here. And nobody on either side of the aisle wants to make it illegal to hire illegal immigrants. So that's but on Israel, until Iraq became free, or sort of free, the only country in the Middle East where Arabs were allowed to vote was Israel. That's the only country before Iraq. Iraq's now a free country and you can vote there. And it's a beacon of freedom. They are the wall, you could say, against terrorism. They have the most powerful Air Force on the planet. They can fly up to 3,000 sorties per day or per hour. Per day sounds good, but somebody told me I think it's per hour. But either per day is a lot. And they took our jets that we sold them, and they souped them up so they go twice as far, twice as fast, by using Israeli ingenuity. And we need to get out of there and let them take some responsibility for the security in the area. I think that, and our troops in the Middle East, I was not against going into Iraq at first. Once we fought and we got the peace, we shouldn't have removed the peacekeeping. Once our troops left there, it filled, Al-Qaeda filled the void. And we left too soon, in my opinion, in Iraq. And we should look back. We're still in Germany. After World War II, the reason why our troops stayed is to keep the Nazis from coming back in. They stayed there until everything was calmed down. And we needed to do the same thing in Iraq, and because Obama pulled them out, we had Al-Qaeda fill the void.
Thank you. Lynn Blankenbecker.
Thank you. So Israel is one of our greatest allies, and so we need to continue that relationship with Israel. There's no doubt we need that strength over in the Middle East, and certainly Israel has done a tremendous job with their restraint and their strategic role in keeping Iran the non-nuclear threat that we need Iran to be. So they definitely need to continue to be our allies, and we certainly need to continue to foster that relationship. As far as our troops in the Middle East, I'm a combat nurse. I've cared for combat soldiers and sailors, Marines, airmen for the last 32 years. I am very proud of what I do, and there's nothing, in my opinion, no higher calling and more noble job than to be able to care for our nation's warriors. And if I never, ever had to care for them again, I'd be grateful. But we cannot be fighting wars and having conflicts on our home soil. You know, it's better to be the away team when it comes to a war than being the home team, and certainly in a conflict. We have troops across the globe. We don't just have troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have troops in Africa. We have troops in Somalia. We have troops all over the globe. And the purpose of putting them there, a lot of it, is to keep the terrorists over in that soil and keep them off of ours. If you've noticed, since 9/11, with the exception of the bombing in Boston, we haven't had an attack on foreign soil, on domestic soil. And that's because we have our peacekeepers out there keeping watch over on foreign soil. So as far as keeping troops across the globe and keeping that deterrence, I'm all for it. It's part of what our military is. Our military is really strong. Thanks.
Brian Bellinger.
First off, I would like to thank our veterans and our troops for their service and sacrifice, because without them, we would not be here today. So, and that goes all the way back. Israel, they're our ally. But I feel the Middle East needs some tough love from America. I think it's time for America to have a little less active role in the Middle East in geopolitics. And our goodwill and self-interest has been giving us many enemies around the world. We have enough issues at home that could use more of our attention. So I'm for us to start pulling our troops back. We've spent countless money and time, and it's time we need to get an exit plan and remove our men and women out of harm's way. We've taught the Middle East plenty on how they should defend themselves, and I believe they should be able to handle it from here. Thank you.
Steve Negron.
Absolutely, I stand committed with Israel 100%. They've been with us from their beginning to now and in the future. And in that discussion, we need to bring our boys and men and women home from the Middle East. We have to. It's the longest combat operations this country has ever had. And it's taken a toll. It takes a toll on families. It takes a toll on the men and women that are serving. It takes a toll on equipment. It takes a toll on the budget. It takes a toll. As a military guy, when I used to do strategic operations, you have to have a clear objective. You get in, you do your objective, and you bring them home. We haven't learned our lesson yet. We think that we have to have this protracted activity for whatever reason. Our job is done there. We need to bring them home. That doesn't mean that we don't have an agile force that goes in hot spots and takes care of a situation. We still have that. We see them today. As a matter of fact, we just sent over some Marines to a country in the Caribbean to help shore up an embassy. Those are the things that we need to do. These protracted wars are a thing of the past. We have this asymmetric idea to fight a symmetric war. It doesn't happen. I'm with Israel, but let's bring our troops home.
Dr. Levinson.
Thank you. My support for Israel is unwavering. It is a beacon of not only an ally, but a friend in a part of the world where there are few of either. We need to sell technology to Israel, and they sell technology to us. Booming companies using Israeli technology are growing there. But as far as what's going on in the Middle East, there is no end. We've been through 2-3 administrations now. Afghanistan, I agreed with going there, but there is still no exit strategy. When are we going to learn? Are our kids going to be fighting there? Are our grandkids going to be fighting there? The rules of engagement are so nebulous, you end up creating more enemies than friends in that part of the world. We got involved in a 1,000-year-old war, and we wonder why we're getting what we're getting. Part of terrorism is that we're there, they don't want us there. Even those that would be our allies don't want us there in many cases. Building a road, building a school, building a playground is not going to change somebody's belief system that we don't belong in their backyard. And if our recent history and our past history is abroad, we can teach them. You caused trouble for us. Anywhere in the world where our interests are, we can be back. But there's no reason for us to continually be there. We don't even remember when our first battle was over there. Was it after World War II? Was it later than that? I was a staunch opponent of the Iraq War. I didn't see what was the benefit from it, and I believe that it did nothing to increase our stability in the Middle East. Israel, helping them, can serve as an example of how one can have trade and mutual allegiances that result in increased stability and not decreased stability. But what we are doing in Afghanistan and other areas and having agreements with terrorist countries such as Iran, that has to change. Thank you.
Okay, Gerard Boulogne will be first to answer the last of the essay questions. What is your position on the national debt and balancing the budget?
Well, I already addressed that earlier when asked what committee I'd like to serve on, but we can expand on that. One of our founding fathers, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin, said that the power to tax is the power to destroy. And there comes a point where there's a tipping point where too much taxes leads to an overburden of taxes where you have to work. Right now we're working, 6 months out of the year to pay all of our taxes, and we're basically, slavery ended in the 1860s, but we are still slaves to the government for 6 months out of the year. I think that can be reduced. There's no reason why the government shouldn't be able to live on 10% of what I like to do is have a 10% federal income tax. I know in Keene there's no income tax, no sales tax. Sorry, I said income tax, I meant sales tax. In New Hampshire there's no sales tax. But a 10% federal sales tax would eliminate the IRS because most states have a sales tax already. They just tack on a federal sales tax and onto the state sales tax and send the check to government, to Washington every month or so. And it would eliminate the IRS. There's no need for the IRS to be poking into your finances and whenever you get a paycheck, the government gets the first cut. How about you getting the paycheck first and then giving the government what you have, what you can afford in the form of a national retail sales tax? If you don't want to pay taxes, you don't spend your money. but of course people spend their money, so they'll get a tax revenue. And that would be a way to control the spending. And my calculations are that they could raise 75% of what they are getting now through a national retail sales tax. And the other 25%, well, maybe they can cut some spending.
Lynn Blankenbecker.
Oh, thanks. So as far as the national debt goes, certainly we can't tax our way out of that by either increasing taxes or creating new taxes. We really need to start trimming the pork away, trimming the fat away, and getting to what we really need to fund as a government. Balancing a budget, we definitely have to have a balanced budget. There is no such thing as a continuing resolution or a government shutdown in our Constitution. It doesn't allow for that, or certainly doesn't make a provision for that. Yet our government has developed a bad habit at our Congress. Since 2006, we haven't had a balanced budget. It's just this continual kick the can down the road with these government shutdowns and these continuing resolutions. And like I said before, that chips away at our national security. You know, every time the government shuts down, we can't train as a military, and so that obviously takes a toll on our military. I don't know if you know this, the Pentagon is 60% civilians, 40% military. They do that on purpose because the military transition out every 2 to 3 years. You need to keep institutional knowledge in a place like that, especially like the Pentagon. And you can only imagine every time the government shuts down or there's a furlough, then you lose 60% of your employees and all of your institutional knowledge. We can't get any work done. And that's just rampant across the entire government when that happens. So I lived in D.C. for 5 years before I came here. When the government shut down, you could actually get around the Beltway pretty quickly because nobody went to work. And so that's a problem, though. Our government can't run. So we need to balance the budget. There is a provision in the Constitution in the enumerated articles that are laid out for our Congress, the tax and spend clause, and that requires us to balance a budget. And so certainly we need to get a responsible budget that we can stick to, balance it, and start working at chipping away the national debt, which are two different issues. So thank you.
Ryan Bellinger.
Well, remember back in question 2, the Appropriations Committee. With the $21 trillion and increasing every day national debt that we got going up, we need to go across the board on every agency in the government and start doing some cutting. And by doing some of these cuts, we have to start with contractors who come and do work for the government and get paid before the goods are delivered. We're still owed Hummers, bulletproof vests, and gear for our soldiers that have never been delivered. We're still owed airplanes that are increasingly being built, but we're never going to be able to use them. So we need to just get into the government, and we need to start cutting some of these areas, and we need to start with contractors, and that'll save us a lot of money if we can stop paying these contractors for goods that aren't being delivered. Because I know in my businesses, if I didn't deliver the goods, you don't get paid. And I think some of the other gentlemen up here that own small businesses will agree with me that we don't get paid if we don't do the job. Thank you.
Steve Negron.
Having done budgets for the Air Force in the past, I understand intimately what it takes to do it. But let me tell you what the problem is. The problem is that nobody's accountable. You get a budget from last year, we give you $10 more in this year, and you're just adding $10 on top of a bad budget. I'm a firm believer in what's called zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting says that you start out with zero, and you defend your budget from the bottom up. That's the way you do it. It's the way I run my business. And when you tell somebody you're starting with nothing and you have to defend what you're going to get, I promise you the pencils will get sharpened and they're going to give you a good budget. But you have to hold them responsible. When I was in the State House this past session, I didn't vote for the governor's budget because it was too big. This is a situation that you have to be brave. You have to be sure in what you're believing in. You can't be afraid. You can't be a shrinking violet because it's going to hurt a lot of people. But we have to do it. We have to rip the Band-Aid off because we cannot leave this debt to our children or their children's children. You cannot. So we're going to rip the Band-Aid off. And folks, let me tell you, everything's on the table. Everything. Entitlement programs, the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Department of Education, everybody's going to share in the pain. And if we don't fundamentally do that, then we're going to go in it. And you know what? Somebody said it up here on the stage, and it's my opinion that the debt is the #1 national security risk to our country. We will bury ourselves under this debt. So zero-based budgeting. Bring those people in, put people in those positions that know how to do balanced budgeting, make them accountable, and we'll get our handle on this debt. Thank you.
Dr. Levinson.
This is a national crisis. It's not going to be the crisis that affects us tomorrow or the day after. We live in a very rich country, but many of us won't even be around when the other shoe falls and we become Greece. Greece didn't become Greece overnight, and we won't become it anytime very soon, but it will come. It will definitely come. And unless we care about our kids and our legacy, we don't have to pay attention. But most of us do care about our kids and our legacy. We don't want to leave a country that is bankrupt, where people can't get paid, people can't do what they need to do to support their families, because if the government is bankrupt, nothing else works. Water doesn't run from the faucets, electricity doesn't flow in the wires. And if you think this is sensationalist, think again. Look at places where that has happened. Look at a city in our own country like Detroit, where they couldn't pay their bills. We have to control spending. You can't tax your way out of these crises because they'll just spend more. I used to say that the spending crisis is the elephant in the room, but it's really the donkey in the room, because it's the Democrats who will not control entitlements, will not control excessive spendings. They're campaigning on such things as sanctuary states that will cost us more. They're campaigning on college education free for everyone. They're campaigning on health care free for everyone. And I love this bumper sticker that says, if you think health care is expensive now, wait till it's free. So we have to control. I've run budgets in very large organizations, and I've stood up to supervisors who said, spend your money, spend your money. And I've turned in excess budgets. I said, well, if they cut my budget next year, so much the better, because if I need something, I'll justify it in a way that you won't turn it down. But I'm not going to spend money that the taxpayers had extracted from them by the force of government without showing good cause. And that's what we need to do. Responsibility, controlling spending, and leaving our next generations the same wonderful country that was left to us.
Robert Burns.
So when we talk about the budget and balancing the budget, and I think everybody here has kind of given different ideas of what they would do, and unfortunately that's the way it's going to be. We're going to have to control spending, and it's going to be a lot of little cuts of spending. So some of the areas that I would look at is, number one, getting rid of the IRS, going with a flat or a fair tax. Sell me on which one you like the most. I can go either way. Decentralizing Washington, D.C. There's no reason that all of these departments need to be in Washington, D.C. The only people that wants to make sure that the Department of Labor, the Department of Transportation, Health and Human Services, the FDA are all within a 10-mile square area are the lobbyists. And we shouldn't have a government that's set up for the lobbyists. We need to decentralize it. Send the Department of Labor to Detroit. Send agriculture to the Midwest. Those are the places that they should be. Therefore, we would be able to reduce the amount of people that work in these departments. We would be able to lower wages so that people could actually have a cost of living. You have to make over $100,000 a year to live in that D.C., Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia area, and that's ridiculous. And when you look at the cost of the houses out there, when you look at the McMansions that are going up every day, that's your money that's paying for it. We need to start holding people accountable, particularly in the Department of Defense. They spend money on projects all of the time that never come into fruition. They are constantly, and the lobbyists and the defense contractors constantly want new technology, new jets. But what are we doing? We're still using jets from over 30 years ago, like the A-10. We're just constantly refitting them with new technology, new sensors and stuff like that. We won't retire them. And my question's always been to many people who work in defense and aeronautics, well, why don't we just rebuild the A-10 at a lower cost? Because we've already done all the research and development in doing this. So it's going to be many different cuts that helps balance the budget. It's going to be many different cuts that cuts the spending and lowers the taxes.
Okay, that concludes the 2-minute questions. We've got some yes/no questions. Now, when I was a freshman at the U.S. Naval Academy, I was told there are 5 appropriate responses to any questions. One was yes, sir, no, excuse, sir, aye, sir. But the 5th one was, I don't know, but I'll find out. So I'm going to give the candidates the opportunity to use that 5th answer if there's something in these yes/no questions that you haven't been able to research yet. We'll start with Brian, and we'll just come down on each of the questions without changing the order for these 4. Do you support the expansion of the Sylvia O. Conte Wildlife Refuge to the tributaries of the Connecticut River?
Yes.
Steve?
What were the 5 answers you had? I'm kidding, no.
Yes, sir, yes, no, or I don't know, but I'll
The
find out.
aye, sir is kind of different. It's not a simple answer, right? But I do know that whatever the case may be, you have to make sure that people
it has to be a simple answer. It's I don't know, or
Yes.
it's still an open question for you.
C.
Okay. Dr. Levinson.
Restate the question.
Yes. Do you support the expansion of the Sylvia O. Conte Wildlife Refuge to the tributaries of the Connecticut River?
No.
Kenny Burns?
Absolutely not. The federal government has no place on my property.
Ditto, no, for the same reason.
It depends.
Okay. Sure, got it. I don't want the microphone. We need to get one down at the other end. Second question. Will you introduce the real reform amendment in Congress if you're elected?
Yes.
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 Absolutely not.
Yes.
Yes in concept, but I don't know if we need an amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, sure. The real reform amendment basically would amend the Constitution so that you could only contribute to a campaign if you're able to vote in that district. So, for example, it would prevent Bill Gates, who lives in Seattle, from giving money to any race in New
It
Hampshire.
would prevent the NRA, let's say, from giving you money and helping you with your race. So.
And there's more information on the net, right? If you Google the real reform amendment, there's information you can find on the internet. All right. Next.
It wasn't really well explained in there. I mean, there's a lot of ifs and buts.
Next question. Do you support term limits for members of Congress?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, and I'm the only one who's been doing it.
Yes.
All right. And the last question, believe me, the torture is almost over. Will you support the effort to drain the swamp?
Yes.
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 Yes, and I've been doing it.
Yes, that's why I'm running.
Okay. So we have agreement on that. Each candidate will be given 5 minutes to do summation. I'll give them a second to catch their breath. I want to introduce a few people in the audience that came out tonight. 2 people are running for election to the state senate. Incumbent Senator Ruth Ward, please stand up. And Swansea resident Dan LeClaire. And then we have some folks running for the New Hampshire House in this cycle. Incumbent Representative Jim McConnell. Ann Cartwright. Kate Day. Back at the camera, Ed Bryans. Steve Malone. And I'm John Theriault. I'm running in Keene Ward 5. So that's all the candidates we have. So yes.
And I'm Terry Wolf. I live in Bedford. I'm running for Senate now.
Thank you very much, Terry. I forgot. Okay.
I'm Donna from I'm running for the House in Nashua.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Lynn Blankenbecker did not get to go first in any of the other questions, but gets to go first now. This is basically free form. She has 5 minutes to state her case.
Thank you very much. So thank you all for coming out tonight. It's clear to me by the group here that you guys are very committed to Republican change into the Congress, and so I'm very proud to be here tonight. And thank you to the Cheshire GOP for hosting this great event. It's a great opportunity for all of us to be able to come together and for you guys to see us in one fell swoop. So thank you for that. So, like I was introduced, I am a nurse and attorney. I've also been in the military for 32 years and served in the House of Representatives. And it was my time in D.C. that really made me decide that I wanted to run for Congress. After I spent 5 years at the Pentagon and the Defense Health Headquarters and watched the dysfunction that was going on, the gridlock that was keeping us from getting our work done, and certainly chipping away at our national security, I decided that I had a great skill set and I should bring that to Congress and hopefully work for all of you. There's a real problem with civility in Congress, and I think that there's a movement afoot right now of trying to bring some civility in Congress, and you know, that's very important. The ability to be able to work with folks, to be able to get a job done is something that I've done for 32 years. It doesn't matter. There's 1 million people that serve in your United States military. It doesn't matter what uniform we wear, the color of our skin. It doesn't matter if we're male or female, our religious beliefs or our political leanings. At the end of the day, all of us come together and do one thing, and that's fight for all of you. We protect and defend the Constitution that we feel so strongly about because we are Americans first. And certainly if 1 million people in uniform can do that, 435 people in your Congress can do that for you, and that is the ethos I intend to bring with me. You know, when I was a young lieutenant in the Air Force, I started in the Air Force, one of our drill sergeants as in our training said to us, you know, look to your right and look to your left. You may not like either of those people, but you better respect them because one day one of them can be saving you. And that's a true statement, and I think we need to take that to Congress. So bringing that leadership to Congress that we need. You know, I'm a commanding officer of an 877-member medical unit. As we've determined already, we are in an active war, and I have to ask sometimes those 877 people to do hard tasks and things that they may not want to do. Be away from their family, go in harm's way, whatever. And it takes leadership to be able to do that. It takes compassion and it takes integrity to be able to stand up and for your unit to have the confidence in you that you can make that happen. And I make that happen every single day for my 877 sailors out in San Diego. So I want to bring leadership and I want to bring civility, two things that I think have been lacking for a long time in our Congress. I talked a little bit about the bad habits in Congress, the continuing resolutions and the government shutdowns that are chipping away, taking away our national security and the safety and security that we all enjoy here in this country and should enjoy, but it's getting eroded. You know, I've listened to Ann Custer for the last 6 years, and I've listened to her say a lot of things. And what she always says is, I voted with Obama 99% of the time. What I've never, ever heard her say is, I vote for New Hampshire. And that's really disappointing to me, because I think New Hampshire comes first. This is our district. When I was in the House of Representatives, a really tough bill came before the House, had to do with education. I was in leadership as a freshman. Freshmen don't generally get into leadership. I was the vice chair of state and federal relations and veterans affairs. And I was told if I didn't vote a certain way on a bill, that I was going to be kicked out of leadership. But the bill was bad for my district. It was an overall okay bill, but it was bad for my district. So the first thing I tried to do was massage the bill and make it better. And that didn't work. So then the second thing I asked for was no roll call. And they were insistent on a roll call. So I voted my conscience, and at the end of the vote, I went up to the speaker and I said, where do you want me to move? Because when you're in leadership, you get a good seat. and you get a good license plate. So I said, where do you want me to move to? And he said to me, I'm not going to kick you out of leadership because you did the right thing in every instance. You demonstrated your integrity, and you demonstrated your commitment to your district. And that's exactly what I'll do for all of you when I go to Congress. I will stand up for this district. We've got a lot of issues, but there's nothing that's insurmountable. I will fight every single day to make sure that I bring to you the resources that you need from Congress so that you can live the life that you all desire and want to enjoy. Furthermore, I will listen. I listen all the time, and it sounds like we don't because we've been speaking mostly, but I will listen, and we will definitely bring that to Congress. You know, I think it's really important. I've identified folks in our community already who I think are experts in areas that can help me be a better Congresswoman for all of you, and so I will definitely listen. So it's time to send Ms. Custer home. I think I come with the skill set that can absolutely bring you what you need in Congress for a representative who will represent your interests well. And, you know, while Ann Custer has been sitting over in Congress voting against funding our military, I've been taking care of our wounded warriors over in Afghanistan. And so I look for an opportunity to talk with her and debate her on the stage, and my time is up. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I will pass the microphone on.
Brian Melanger.
You know, I have it in my heart to do the right thing for the citizens and for the Granite State. I believe that we the people belongs to the people, and we the people belong into Congress and into the government. We have the voice. It's been proven this past election. When we come together as a nation, we can move great things. You know, there's a little old man that I sat with at an old general store that I talked with him, and we talked about how New Hampshire used to be really red, how it used to be a red state, and pretty much all Republicans were, you know, in Washington and in our local government. And he says that it's just increasingly, it kind of bugs him that the state has gone way over to the independent and leaning towards the Democrat side. And, you know, we got to ask ourselves, why is that? Why did we give up? Did the Republican Party give up? So we need to show our voice. We need to get out there. We need to get to the vote. We need to get your neighbors and your friends and get them out there to vote for a Republican candidate. If they're independent, we got to talk to them and sway them for the reasons why. Because it's the people in this room who devoted tonight to come here to listen to us speak that we need to help our neighbors and convince them or talk to them, try and find the reasonings why they're leaning way independent or way left. And if we go out there and do that, we can do the same thing we did back when Donald Trump was elected, and we can bring the majority and actually show that New Hampshire can be a red state again. So that's all I got to say. It's Belanger for New Hampshire. Thank you very much.
Steve Negron.
I've traveled this district all the way up to Pittsburgh, up to Westmoreland, down to Nashua. And there's one thing that resonates with me, with all of you people that are here, is there's this great national insecurity. There's a lot of things, and it's common within the district. It's those things that give you that little pit in the gut. It's about the debt. It's about immigration. It's about the opioid crisis. It's about national security. It's about those things that you should have a voice in Washington. It's about those things that who listens and who fights for me. We don't have that. She voted against the tax package. Why? I don't know. Because maybe that's not what leadership wanted her to. You know, you look at her track record, and we've done a lot of detailed work on Ann Custer. And oh, by the way, my campaign will never call her Annie, because Annie's the nice lady on the block that makes cookies, and you want to go over and sit down and have milk with her. This is Ann McLean Custer, professional lobbyist turned politician. When you look at her voting record, she makes Pelosi look like a moderate. And that's scary. But this campaign is about fighting for New Hampshire families and freedom. It's about taking the fight to Washington. It's not about bringing swamp water to New Hampshire. It's about taking clear, crisp river water to Washington. It's about coming back here and listening. It's about coming back here and that everybody has a say. And every voice is just as important as the next. And if you don't come back, which she doesn't, how can she represent? St. Anselm did a poll. 24% had never even heard of her. She's a 3-term incumbent, people. That's 6 years. That's not what you do. This campaign understands the problems. This campaign has a resident experience to do multiple things in Washington. My small business background, my Air Force, my military background, I talked about it earlier, it's varied in areas that are very important. The nuclear world, there's very few people in this world that have walked the walk that I've walked. There's 435 congressmen and women, only 79 have military service. You know, I'm very proud of my Air Force career, but today I wear a U.S. Army wristband, and let me tell you why. One of my best friends is in hospice at the VA Medical Center in Manchester. And why? Because we're too damn concerned about the people inside the building than about the soldiers and sailors, airmen and Marines outside the building trying to get in. We just passed a choices program that allows veterans to go get care. Mark didn't have that. The Veterans Administration just signed an agreement to do cancer research and cancer clinicals for veterans. You know what? If my friend had had that, he might still have a chance to be alive. Ann Custer comes around here and wants to take a victory lap on the shoulders of my veterans. Not on my watch. Not on my watch. I will be a voice for veterans. I'll be a voice for you. And with God's help, we'll take on Ann Custer November 8th. God bless you and thank you very much.
Dr. Levinson.
Thank you. Again, it's Stuart Levinson, Dr. Levinson. If we're going to defeat Ann Custer and reform Congress, we need a new type of candidate, one from outside the political establishment. I'm a doctor. I'm not a politician. I'm never going to be a politician. I'm going to fight for the constituents of this district the way I've fought for my patients in my many years practicing medicine. I met with Ann Custer. That's why I'm running. That's the question you have to ask. Why is someone running? I sat across the table from her. The first thing she said to me was, why am I bothering? The VA is not in her congressional district. Then, after a few minutes, I look down at the table, and she says to me, I have to go now, but this is a good conversation. We can continue this if you come to my fundraiser. And down on the table was a form with various degrees of donation in the $1,000 range. She thought she had 6 doctors in a room, and she was going to pluck us. Well, instead, after the next 3 times I met with her, I decided that I was going to run against her. Now, when I decided this, I had to go first to see what else I could do. I called the Republican Party, and I decided, again, we needed somebody from the outside. I blew the whistle on the VA when the VA was endangering patients through slipshod care and inept management. When I blow the whistle on Washington, they're going to change too. And I knew when I blew the whistle on the VA, I risked it all. But that's the definition of integrity, and that's the brand of leadership that I've always practiced, and that's why I'm asking for your vote. I'm not a candidate chosen by the Washington elites who want another Washington insider, another career politician, or another politician who thinks they're ready for the next rung on the political ladder. I'm a doctor. I'm always going to be a doctor. And when I get to Washington, I'm going to concentrate on those issues which are just so important to the American people and the people of New Hampshire. Health care, border security, national security, support of the Second Amendment and our constitutional rights, which are being trampled upon, and of course, the looming federal deficit. Those are the issues that are so important. We talked a little bit about many of those issues tonight. How border security, how we have no control of our borders, that has to change. How healthcare keeps getting more and more costly and less outcomes that benefit patients. Support of the Second Amendment. How come we always have to be on the defensive, giving a little bit more? People in Washington on the left are saying, well, if we close this loophole, which doesn't really exist, then we'll be happy and we'll go away. And the next day, they want to take away another one of our constitutional rights. A retired Supreme Court justice said the Second Amendment was a relic of the Constitution. And I said, I shudder to think when the left starts thinking that other parts of the Bill of Rights are relics. And that's why I'm running. And I ask for your support. Take a look at the Levinson plan at levinsonforcongress.com. Please, I thank all those who are representatives here who are running. It's a thankless job, and I think we should all applaud them as well. Please, vote. Bring friends out to vote in the primary September 11th and November Election Day. Thank you so much.
Robert Burns.
Thank you. We didn't get an opportunity in the beginning to give a little intro about ourselves. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm going to tell a little bit about myself. My name is Robert Burns, and obviously I'm running for Congress. I was born in Nashua, New Hampshire. I grew up in Bedford. My first home was in Amherst. I then later went on to go to college here at Keene State College. I served as the Hillsborough County Treasurer. Then I co-founded a business, Burns Automation, which is mostly in the automation and quality control industry, mostly focusing on pharmaceutical and food. So why am I running here, and what wraps all of this up? Well, what really got me thinking about running was to be there for Donald Trump. I served as a National Youth Coalition's director for Donald Trump. And I see him there in D.C. with not a lot of backup and support in the House and the Senate. We have Republicans there, but they don't all support him. And they try to move him away from his agenda. I'd like to be elected to be there to support his agenda. I also have some different approaches on issues that are important here. Number one, I support the Second Amendment, but I also support a constitutional or a national reciprocity for carry licenses. I think it's completely ridiculous. We're here in, well, you guys are lucky because you're close to Vermont, but when I'm down near the Massachusetts border, if you were to pass over the Massachusetts border, accidentally get pulled over and you happen to have your gun and you're legally, to carry license in your car, you can be arrested and put into jail for that. And that's completely ridiculous. We need a national reciprocity when it comes to licenses. I have different approaches and knowledge from my time in the pharmaceutical industry on the opioid crisis today. The rehabilitation centers, they're addicted to the money as the addicts are addicted to the drugs. And another thing is people just are not taking personal responsibility. Could you imagine if people went to AA and blamed Budweiser and Dewar's for their problems? That's what we're seeing with the rehabilitation clinics and recovery centers, is it's not their fault. We need to take a stronger approach when it comes to the opioid crisis. It's one of the most important issues that's happening right here in New Hampshire. It's the one that many people are concerned about. Lastly, when it comes to defeating Ann Kuster, I think I'm the only person, I know I'm the only person that can really activate that Trump base. I was an early supporter of Donald Trump. I went to the national convention as a delegate. I'm strongly supported by many of his supporters out there. I know his children well that I got to spend a lot of time with on the campaign, and I absolutely am going to activate that base that we don't normally see come out in midterm elections or that aren't presidential elections. That being said, when I'm elected to Congress, I'm going to look at every piece of legislation and I'm going to ask myself, is this constitutional, cost-effective, and necessary? Thank you very much. Let's make America great again. Thank you very much.
Gerard Boulogne.
I've been waiting for this. I'm going to expand on draining the swamp on my final speech. I've never had 5 minutes before, so I'm very gracious here for all the time. But it's often said that those who aspire for political power are often the ones least qualified to wield it. And I believe it's been proven over and over again. The swamp is an example of it. The political elite. We all want to defeat Ann Custer, but before we defeat Ann Custer, we have to clean up our own party. Now, I said earlier, I'm going to repeat this joke because I want it caught on camera, is that I was raised on a dairy farm, and I know what political promises look like, because every morning when I went into the barn floor was covered with political promises. Good. Now I got the clip I can use out of my YouTube account. I didn't say it right the first time I blew it. But I decided to run not because I aspire for political power. It's because I want to drain the swamp. Now, I'm the only one up here out of all the candidates that has actually been draining the swamp. I've been taking actions to drain the swamp. The swamp in Washington, D.C. is big, a lot of swamp critters in it, but it's also fed by 50 tributary swamps. It doesn't live on its own. We all need to take care of our own swamps in each individual state. And in New Hampshire, I became politically active in 2004. My company was worth millions at the time, $4 million to be precise. I could have retired in my 40s, lived comfortably, but I decided to work my company for a few more years and probably sell it for twice as much or more. And I liked what I was doing. I was in my 40s, healthy. What do I do with $4 million? Just sit around. And I liked my job. I owned my own company. So I decided to keep going. I branched into public construction, school construction. It was a good fit for my company. I saw an ad in the paper in the Manchester Union Leader to re-roof the Manchester Vote Tech. This was 1999. And they said it would cost around $3 million. And I go, $3 million? People who are not in the commercial roofing industry, it doesn't mean anything. With $3 million, I could roof the Mall of New Hampshire twice. So I said, well, the Vote Tech, it can't be that big. So I went and checked that out, and it was not much bigger than this room, probably twice the size of this room. $3 million. I put in a bid at $35,000. I was making a profit at $35,000. The bids went out for $3 million. $2.9 million. So I started asking questions. Where'd the extra money go? And I was told in no uncertain terms, I don't know if this is going to work. This is the first time I do this. Let's see. All right. Oh, not working. There's a timer on this thing. But I was told, I'm going to say what's on the recording. Shut up or you're going to get shot. Freedom of speech does not apply to politicians like you in the state of New Hampshire. So I got this on tape. I went to law enforcement, that and others. There was a lot of recordings. One of the biggest supporters of Steve Negron, Dennis Hogan, Hillsborough County attorney, pressed charges 35 counts of wiretapping while ignoring the death threats against me for exposing corruption. Ed Nail is on the steering committee for Steve Negron, threatened me with physical bodily harm. I got this on tape. Simply he's a coalition for New Hampshire taxpayers. He's the dictator there. And when I was pressing him, I says, there's billions of dollars being stolen nationwide. And there's hundreds and hundreds of million dollars being stolen in school construction in New Hampshire. And that's in Manchester alone. And he threatened me with severe physical bodily harm if I didn't shut up. And this is the head of the Coalition for New Hampshire Taxpayers. I got it on tape. So I go to law enforcement, and Kelly Ayotte prosecuted me for wiretapping. Dennis Hogan, 35 counts of wiretapping. And it gets even worse, because on those tapes they were bragging about getting rid of Dr. Heber, who was a friend of mine, who was exposing an $8 million theft from a school construction project. He took my side. A couple of weeks later, he dropped dead. Unexpectedly, mysteriously, they're on tape bragging about killing him and how they killed him. And nobody's doing anything about it. And you won't hear a peep in the Manchester Union Leader. Nothing. The Manchester Union Leader, for all of you who understand here, is owned and controlled by the Scagliotti and Tomasco families. 2 Union Leader reporters, Nancy Mearsman, award-winning reporter, Roger Talbot, award-winning reporter, both of them dead. One of them disappeared. Nancy Mearsman dropped dead. Shortly after I gave her all my files and all these recordings, she was going to report on it. She was talking Pulitzer. Joe McQuaid fired her, and a month later she dropped dead. So that's the swamp that we're looking at here. And that's why I'm running. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the candidates for coming here tonight and sharing their views with us. I'd like to thank all of you for coming out and listening very politely. You've been a wonderful audience. And I'd like to ask all of you to go to the polls on September 11th for the primary and vote one of these great candidates to be the Republican nominee for CD2 in New Hampshire in the November election. Thank you very much and good night.